Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 6 Things We Learned from MK Dons 4, Bradford City 1. If you do go on to enjoy today's episode, please make sure to drop a like on their form. If you could try to 80 likes on today's video, that'd be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you're new as well. We are now on the road to 8,000 subscribers, so please make sure you are subscribed. If you haven't already, with that post notification bell on, it's free to do so and it does massively help out. Get a comment in as well down in the comment section down below. Let us know down below your thoughts on our 6 talking points from today's video. Obviously, a disappointing defeat, and I am once again joined by Frank. I think if we did 6 red boxes today, I don't think anyone could actually complain about that. Obviously, the game was played on Tuesday. We never upload really a 6 things that we learned on Thursday because I uploaded the vlog so late. It was like 5 o'clock on Wednesday morning. I thought, well, we'll leave it an extra day, let things settle down on that sort of stuff. In terms of the manager front, before we get into it, Dean Holden is now currently the favourite and reports to be believed that apparently he held talks with the club this week. So it sounds like he could be the favourite, but there's been so many different names mentioned over the last couple of weeks. But we'll start then with box number 1. And it's one of the few positives we'll start with. It's a green box for Alex Gilliead. Obviously, the scorer of our goal, and it wasn't just the goal, it was an absolutely brilliant finish from him, and that's what we need to see more of from Gilliead. That was one of the things that everyone criticised him for, including myself last season, with his lack of goals and assists. Already 2 goals for him now. I think he only got the 1 last season, so to already have 2 is not a bad return for a holding midfielder, really, but I think the way we tried to play certainly suited him, high press, lots of legs, lots of energy, and he scored a brilliant goal as well. It's not like his 2 goals this season have been tappings. There have been 2 really, really good finishes. I think both assisted by Pointon as well. But it wasn't just the goal. Like I say, he was one of the few players who really came away from the game with any real credit, pressing, tackling, just trying really to really lead from his position. And it was a shame that the game ended the way that it did, because I think as soon as we equalised, obviously it was a terrible start to the game. We could have been 2, 3, 4-0 down before we even actually equalised. And I think when we got that equaliser, I thought we were going to go on and kick on. Unfortunately, didn't work that way. And on another day, we could have genuinely lost that game by double figures. We were absolutely awful. One of the worst performances, which is such a shame because we played so well on Saturday, and then it was a complete contrast. You'd think Mike Hughes was still in charge, judging by the way we played. And that's not taking away credit from MK Dons, because they were a very good side. Mike Williamson is a very good manager. Obviously, MK Dons acted fast, got him in. And do I think his style of play would work at Valley Parade? No, because our goal comes from their mistake from failing to play out from the back. And I think our fans wouldn't have got on board with that. We certainly don't have the players to play out from the back, in my opinion. And like I say, going back onto Gilliead, I think he had a pretty good game. One of the few players who came away from the game with any real credit, and was also a really good goal.
Yeah, both goals he scored this season have been really well taken, and he's fully deserved the 2 goals that he's got as well. In the games that he's played, he's really, performed well. And I think that's kind of a freedom that you have when you've got the engine of Alex Gilliead. You'll be able to run for 90 minutes, and that's something that the fans can get behind. And obviously he's had to train hard to that. He's had to work hard to kind of get to that ability where you can run for 90 minutes and, not get tired. So, Alex Gilliead, he's fully deserved that goal, and it was really well taken. Like I said, I think Bobby Pointon linked up with him really well. He's out-muscled his player and managed to get a foot in, and it's a great run and it's a great hit shot. And I thought we were going to get back into the game. It's an early goal. It's another set-piece routine, which obviously I'm really, kind of annoyed about. Short corner play to the edge, and debates whether High Lewis couldn't do better, but that's probably not his worst mistake of the night. I definitely think it wasn't a terrible error from Harry Lewis. And I thought we were going to get back into the game. I thought Alex Gilliead's equaliser, I thought it was just a blip, but didn't turn out to be that way. And when a player runs for 90 minutes and gives everything, that's a positive you can take out, and you can, give them credit for that. But I think for the large majority of them yesterday, I don't think anyone can really come off the pitch with their heads held high. I think he's one of the very few that can, come away with that with something positive, because they were all terrible yesterday. And it's a complete contrast, like you said, to the Wrexham game. We played so well, pressed, created lots of chances. But that game, we could have, like you said, been down by 10, 11 goals by full time. It wasn't a great performance, and Gilliead's fully earned his spot in that centre mid role now. I think obviously Walker and Smallwood being suspended, he had massive shoes to fill coming into that MK Dons game. MK Dons are probably in a false position, to be fair, in terms of where they are in the league. They're a brilliant side, and they've probably got League One quality players. So yeah, I think there was a lot of expectation. Like Gilliead's shoulders to kind of run that midfield without Smallwood. Obviously Kevin McDonald alongside him as well. We'll get onto him later, but yeah, positive signs from Alex Gilliead. For the rest of them, not so much, but I think that's one of the few positives we can take away from the game.
Yeah, normally when you go into a match or play any game, the players giving 110% is the minimum. But the fact that we're having to praise the Gilliead for doing the minimum tells you how poor some of them players were. Because I think on Tuesday, some of them were either absolutely knackered and couldn't physically run anymore, or they just gave up. I mean, we'll get on to Ash Taylor in a minute, but their fourth goal, I think he could do a lot better with. Lewis, I think his positioning is poor for that. And they were just, not even just them two, there were so many players who were just walking, jogging, being lazy. Even at 3-4-1 down, you've still got to play at 110% and show that you're not just going to give up, because that's what the best teams do. They go to the end no matter what the result is. And you look at the amount of late goals Wrexham have scored, for example. We very rarely seem to score late goals, and it was just overall a really disappointing performance. We'll move on then to box number 2. It is a red box for Ash Taylor. I mean, I called this in my match preview. I said he absolutely had to be dropped, because on a big pitch like that, against some really good, pacey, technical strikers, he'd get absolutely torn apart, and he did. He was lucky not to get sent off. I think the referee let him off very lightly. He probably felt a little bit sorry for him because of how poorly he was being made to look, and I don't think that's necessarily being made to look. He's just not good enough. He got a lot of praise on Saturday for his performance against Wrexham. I didn't really understand why, because there were a few times where he got turned inside out. Should definitely do better for Wrexham's goal. He goes and heads thin air, and on Tuesday night against MK Dons, he was absolutely atrocious. The amount of times where he plays a shocking back pass to Harry Lewis and then just stands there, doesn't even then try and move into a position for an angle to pass the ball back to him. The first goal actually comes from him passing it to Lewis poorly. He then has to take it wide, and then Stubbs doesn't really clear it properly, gets blocked, and obviously Lewis shouldn't allow it to go out for a corner, and we should defend the set piece better. But it all comes from that. The fourth goal, Taylor passes the ball straight to Gilbert. Absolutely shocking. He's just not good enough to play for Bradford City. And we'll get on to McDonald later, but this is the problem with McDonald not actually being the manager, because the right thing to do, and a good manager would have dropped Ash Taylor and brought back in Matty Platt or Jonathan Tompkinson. Either way, Ash Taylor cannot be starting, especially in a game like this. But because McDonald is not the manager, if in 2 weeks' time he goes then back to being a player, he's then got to have this relationship with Taylor, for example, if he had dropped him, where it's a little bit broken. So I can understand from McDonald's point of view, when he's not the official manager, we've not made the statement, why he didn't do that. And I feel like McDonald, he's kind of got his hands tied behind his back a little bit, because he has to make the easy decisions. But Taylor was just absolutely awful. And like I said in my match preview, and we could all see this coming, he got absolutely tore apart. And again, so many other players could get red boxes, but Ash Taylor was absolutely awful once again. He wasn't bad on Saturday, made a couple of mistakes, but on Tuesday night, like a lot of players, but him specifically was just absolutely terrible.
I think Ash Taylor's probably lucky he's even got a red box, to be fair. I think he could easily got something worse than that if it's even available. But I think, the reaction from the Wrexham game in terms of Ash Taylor's performance was very much kind of based on the fact he was much better than he was at Crawley. And I think that's kind of the reason he's got that kind of credit for the game. I think with the Crawley, the bar set so low that anything that Ash Taylor would have done in that game would have been better, obviously. We didn't keep a clean sheet, but we've held Wrexham to a draw. And I think the overall team performance has kind of benefited him in that sense. So if I'm being honest, I think that is Ash Taylor's last game in a Bradford shirt. I don't think we'll see him again. And I'm definitely not complaining at the fact of that. He's too slow. He's a 6'5" player, and he's probably one of the muscliest players in that Bradford City squad. He's absolutely massive, and he's getting bullied by a 19-year-old. I mean, that says everything, really. He doesn't use his height. The long throws aren't even working. His passing is absolutely terrible. He's too slow to turn as well. We're getting spun by too many attackers. And in this division, they're going to punish you. You've got so many fast wingers in this division. And, Brad Halliday's not always going to be there to defend, the attackers. They're going to be attacking through the middle. And Ash Taylor and Sam Stubbs didn't deal with that well enough on Tuesday night. And I think after the Crawley game, I wouldn't have been bothered if we saw him again. I think with him starting again, I think it was very much down to how well the whole squad played, and if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. Again, I think with Kevin McDonald and him and Ash Taylor having such a close relationship, that kind of needs to be put to one side, and you've got to think from a managerial perspective, because Matty Platt, while he's not had a brilliant season, he's a standard 6-7 out of 10 every week, and he's going to get the job done. You've got to bring him in. You've got to do what's right for the club. Sometimes it will break relationships. Sometimes it's, people are going to be upset about it, but it has to be done from, a business perspective, because we need to get 3 points in games like that against teams that are struggling. And teams that don't have a good fan base. No respect to MK Dons. It's a brilliant stadium, but there was only about 5,500 last night, and we really could have. They didn't have a 12th man at the end of the day. MK Dons, we really could have capitalised on that. And yeah, it wasn't a great selection at the back, and he can't start there again. I think Jonathan Tomkinson, he's done well for the national team for USA, and he's come off the back of a few good performances with the youth setup. I think he would have been a much better option. He's a tall player, he's a ball playing from what you've heard. He's quite fast. He could have dealt with that. And we're never going to know it. That was a perfect game to test him against because MK Dons aren't doing well. They're towards the bottom of the table. That would have been a perfect game to bring him in, especially if you're not going to use Matty Platt either. And for whatever reason, he didn't get selected. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked at next game. We've got Sutton next week, which are pretty much second bottom. So I think that's a perfect game to bring Jonathan Tomkinson in, especially if Matty Platt's kind of out the question at the moment. We've got a lot of centre-backs that can come in, Kieran Kelly, Ash Taylor, you've got Jonathan Tomkinson. There's a lot of defenders that can come in and prove a point to Kevin McDonald or the future manager as well. So there's a lot to think about at the centre-back, but Ash Taylor can't play there again.
Yeah, I think you look at all our centre-halves and they're all just very samey. They're all, more bruises. And we don't really know much about Tomkinson because he has only played 5 minutes for the football club. But I think when you've got a squad, you should be picking players to, especially defensively, nullify the opposition. Like when we're playing against the big physical teams, like a Sutton on Saturday, that's when you should go with someone like a Matty Platt. But when you're going to play against a team like an MK Dons, who are going to have the fast-paced strikers, I don't think they've got one single physical striker. Even the two on the bench in Issa and Lecco, they're still more pacey, technical sort of players rather than a big bruiser like an Ollie Palmer or a Stephen Fletcher. Like Sutton on Saturday, that is when we should be playing someone like a Matty Platt. But MK Dons, we should have played someone like a Jonathan Tomkinson. And I think our recruitment, again, we come back to this, everything's too samey. And I know we've recruited for the Mike Hughes system, but none of our centre-halves this season are really ball players. Stubbs, I think, is the best at it. And even sometimes he does make mistakes. I think you can clearly tell Stubbs has played at League One level because he's slightly more advanced. You see the amount of times where he looks like he's going to hook it into the channel. He does like a step over, cuts back and pass it back to Harry Lewis. But none of our other centre-halves can do that. They just clog it and slog it. And yeah, our recruitment hasn't exactly been great, especially defensively this season. We had to replace Critchlow, who I personally didn't think was as good as what he was made out to be last season, especially defensive. I thought, obviously, as a ball player, he's very good, but I thought he was certainly replaceable. The fact we've replaced him with Ash Taylor, though, wasn't exactly, the greatest decision we've ever made. But we'll move on then to box number 3. I'm going with a yellow box for Harry Lewis. Now, if we're basing this on the first half an hour, it's a red box. If we're basing it on the second half, it's probably a green box. So I feel like he made some mistakes in the game, but then he also made some really, really good saves. So I think it's only fair that we give him a yellow. The first goal, obviously short corner. Wilson actually gets blocked. It would have been harsh if he got given as a foul. It happens quite a lot in football. And the shot, it's another one of them where it's on the floor and he's a little bit too slow to react. I wouldn't say he was massively at fault for it, but I think he could have certainly done better. The second goal, the free kick, I think the wall is set up awfully. I've seen the angle from the MK Dons point of view behind the goal, and the wall is barely even in line with the goal. Even if that's David Beckham trying to whip it around the wall, it wouldn't have even made sense. It didn't need to be that wide. And obviously, Payne's shot is down the middle. There's a little bit of movement on it, and it's hit really, powerfully. But I think he should definitely do better with that one. The third one, I'm not going to give him any flack for that. I think it's just a brilliant goal. Halliday gets beaten. He hasn't been great the last 2 games as Brad Halliday. Ball comes in. It's just a brilliant finish from a man who obviously shouldn't even be on the pitch for that kick out at Kevin McDonald. How the referee didn't see that, I'll never know. That was absolutely criminal. But Lewis in the game still did make some really, really good saves. In the first half, I'd say he made 2 or 3. Probably saves you'd expect him to make, but still good saves. In the second half, again, I think he made maybe 3 or 4 decent saves. One which I thought was absolutely incredible. It was just before I think they scored their third goal. I think it was from Max Dean. It was at point blank range, and he managed to tip it onto the crossbar, and then the follow-up went over the bar. But I thought his distribution was poor in the game as well, and I just don't really know what to say from Harry Lewis, but I think at the end of the day, when a goalkeeper faces 19 million shots like what he did, he's bound to make a mistake or two. And if he'd have saved all them, there'd be no chance to be playing in League Two. Last season he made a couple wonder saves every now and again, but that was because we barely faced many shots at him. We were getting blocks in, we were stopping crosses and all that sort of stuff. And he's facing a lot more shots this season. I think that is why we're seeing him make more mistakes. And he's a League Two goalkeeper at the end of the day. He is going to unfortunately make mistakes. As good as what he was last season, he's got a lot of credit in the bank. Like I say, on Tuesday night, he did make some really good saves, but when you allow your goalkeeper to face so many shots, they're bound to make a mistake every now and again, and that's why it has to be a yellow box for me.
When on a goalkeeper, if you concede 4 goals, you haven't really done your job right on paper. But I think he definitely stopped it from being double figures that game. There's some outstanding saves, and we saw glimmers of what we saw last season from Harry Lewis. But he's a player who's very much out of form at the moment, and that goes for a lot of the key players last season. I think Brad Halliday is the only real player from last season that's kind of built on last season's brilliant season. He's someone who's pretty out of form at the moment. There's some things that he should have been saving. I think the positioning for the Gilliead goal is dross. At the end, he controls that wall. At the end of the day, he tells them to where to move, and it is a poorly positioned wall. And I've not really had a chance to look at it too much, but it seems like he's flapped at it a bit on that free kick, and he probably could have done better from it. It's a brilliant free kick, and if you can manage to hit the target from that distance, it's a brilliant free kick regardless. But and then with the first goal as well, I think that's one that he needs a bit of slack on. I think it was kind of a good finish. It was well placed in the bottom corner. I can kind of give him a bit of backing for that. But for the rest of it, he made some brilliant saves. The one that was kind of hit him from point blank range, and he saved it, tipped it onto the bar. That's brilliant. And he made some brilliant saves that game, but at the end of the day, we have conceded 4 goals and we have lost the game 4-1. There was a lot of mistakes from Harry Lewis, and with the defence as well, I think the defence was really poor, and that allowed him to have a lot of shots. And like you said, he's a League 2 goalkeeper. He's not going to save everything in the world, and he's prone to a few mistakes in his game. So I think the defence kind of made him look bad on the day, but I think overall it was just a poor defensive display. And I think definitely we've talked about it a few times this season because he's not been amazing, Harry Lewis. I think we do need to look at a backup in January to make sure we can push him to the best of his ability. I think obviously someone who can step in as well when he's not playing brilliant, would be useful. He's someone who's got a kind of a freedom in this squad, which no one has, which I've talked about before. That regardless of performances, he'll be the starting goalkeeper week in, week out. And I think sometimes that might come off as, a bit of carelessness in Harry Lewis, where he can kind of go about his business and it doesn't matter what happens because he'll still be starting week in, week out. And that's why I think we need a starting goalkeeper that can come in in case Harry Lewis has an absolute rotter. Colin Doyle is never going to play a league game for Bradford City. Obviously, he came in the cup, and I think that was kind of to give a rest to Harry Lewis. He's played probably nearly 100 games almost in a Bradford City shirt consecutively, all 90 minutes. So I think he wanted a rest for Harry Lewis. But Colin Doyle's someone who I wouldn't rely on in the league either. He's quite old now. He's a goalkeeping coach, really. So I think we definitely need to look at a backup goalkeeper in January just to kind of boost the squad depth as well. But yeah, that's something we need to look at in January. Not his worst performance, but we have conceded 4 goals. So
yeah, I think it's something we've mentioned a few times already this season that we need some more competition for Harry Lewis. And no matter how poorly he plays, no matter how many mistakes that he makes, I still would want him to be starting every league game. He's still, without a doubt, our best goalkeeper. And I think if he wasn't facing as many shots as what he is at the moment, we wouldn't be conceding as many goals. But I think it's clear to see that he has had a slight regression from last season. We saw Wrexham on Saturday. They had 1 shot on target. There was a header straight at him, and it went in, unfortunately. But we'll move on then to box number 4. Now, this box could have been for about 8 players, if we're honest. We've gone with a red for Emanuel Osadebe, but it could have been for Rydalg, Wilson, Tulloch, Adore. The list goes on. Tyler Smith. There were so many players who just didn't do anything. But Osadebe, for me, I think deserves a red box over all of them because he's a bit... I don't know what the right word is, but he never seems to be in the right position. And I don't know if that was maybe Rydal who got the press wrong or Osadebe, but in that first half, I think it was Cameron Norman, their right wing back. He had so much time and space constantly just to get the ball out of his feet. And I think that neither of them, Osadebe and Rydal, knew who was meant to be pressing who. And when Osadebe had the ball, again, just didn't really do much with it. But that could be said for all the other players that I've just mentioned there. But Osadebe just doesn't do enough for me. And while he did score, 2 goals in 2 games, and he looked much better, especially in that game against AFC Wimbledon, we saw the Osadebe again in this one that we've seen too much in a Bradford City shirt where he doesn't do anything. It takes him 20 minutes to try and control the ball, and he tackles himself more than he actually gets tackled by the opposition. And it's frustrating because, yes, he's in League 2 and he's going to be inconsistent, but he's now getting to a point where he's being more consistently poor than what he's consistently good. And it seemed like them 2 games were a little bit more of just a purple patch, and he never really looked like contributing. And again, it's the case of Osadebe, especially later on in that game. I mean, I don't know how he managed to get 80 minutes or whatever it was in the end. That was crazy to see. Obviously, it was great to see Harry Chapman back on the pitch, his first appearance since April, and I hope he can get more and more game time as the weeks go and he can really get back up to being match fit, because we are going to need him, especially as a winger. I certainly don't see him as a number 10 in my opinion, but Osadebe, he just doesn't do anything apart from really lose the ball, get tackled. His press is poor. He looks sometimes lazy, and I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but it's certainly what it looks like from a fan's point of view. And when he got subbed off, he was sarcastically cheered by the fans. We've not seen that for a number of weeks now. And I think Osadebe and Bradford City, it's just not really going to work. I think a genuine move for him would probably be the best thing, because it doesn't really look like it is going to work out at Bradford City. I think he much more suits a mid-table, lower league side in this division, where he can really be the star man and he can play. And even if he has a couple poor performances, when he's playing 90 minutes week in, week out, I think that's when you'll see the best version of Osadebe. Now, don't get me wrong, he said himself, he sees himself more as a central midfielder, number 8, rather than a left winger. So maybe he's playing slightly out of position, but he played in a number of positions as a left winger, as a number 10, and he just wasn't very effective in there. And it is quite frustrating, because we know there's a player in there. We paid money for Emanuel Osadebe, but he's just not showing us, as the fans, it consistently enough. And that is the reason why I've had to go with another red box. But like I mentioned earlier, it could have been for about 6 or 7 different players.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you could have given a red box to absolutely everyone, but I think with the way Osadebe has been playing recently, he's kind of someone you need to pick out. He's a player that I want to back so much because of what he's been for in a Bradford shirt, and he clearly, he's attached to the fan base. He wants to do well, I can see, but sometimes I don't know what his best position is. He's 6'2", 6'3", playing left wing with poor footwork. It's never going to work, and I don't understand what position he's going to play in. Is he more of a holding midfielder? He's a fast player. Is he more of a attacking midfielder? Is he box to box? Does he have it in him? I don't know what his best position is, and I don't think left wing's the one for him. We've got plenty of good options that we can play there. We've got, obviously Chapman's coming back now, Adam Wilson, Tulloch, even Afoka wasn't even included in the matchday squad. I'm not sure if there's an injury problem there or something like that, but I want to get behind him, but it kind of feels like he doesn't really have a place here at Bradford. There's not really many positions that he can slot in and do a job in. We've not really seen it much. And I think there is a player in there. We saw him in pre-season before the leg break. He looked really good against Sunderland and stuff like that. I think he was playing as an 8 there. But he seems to kind of float around different positions, like midfield, attacking midfield, left wing. And I'm not sure which one's his best kind of position, really. But maybe even a loan move is probably the best thing from in January, just assess him from there, or maybe even a permanent move. But I don't think it's going to work from in a Bradford shirt, which is a shame, because he was a great character and stuff like that. But unfortunately, he's just not as good as a footballer as he is a person, unfortunately. He gives the ball away a lot, like you said. And I think he took his goals really well for the 2 goals that he scored against Grimsby and Wimbledon. But I know he's got that in him, but he's not able to deliver that on a consistent basis. And that's why he's kind of in and out the squad and a fringe player, because he doesn't deliver it on a consistent basis. So I'm disappointed. I wish it would work out, but I don't think it's gonna. So I think maybe a move in January, permanently or temporarily, is the solution for Osadebe.
Yeah, I think especially with him being out of contract in the summer, we might as well just look to move on, because I just don't see where he fits in at Bradford City. He's certainly not a holding midfielder. I think he switches off too much defensively. We've seen a number of times this season, whether it be Gilliead, Smallwood, Stubbs. There's a number of players who've really had a little bit of a go at Osadebe because he switched off and allowed his man to run past him. And I think he's certainly got that in him to work hard, but he doesn't seem to push himself through and then, really want to work that bit harder. And it is really frustrating to see, because like what we've said a number of times, there is clearly a good player in there in Osadebe, but he's just not showing it to us. And yeah, it is really frustrating. We'll move on then to box number 5. We'll get back onto the positives then before we end on another negative. We've gone with the green box here for Bobby Pointon. Again, just you can tell he's a fan on the pitch for Bradford City. Similar to Gilliead, gave it 110%. I've no idea why he was the first player to be subbed off. At that point, he was certainly a contender for man of the match. I think obviously playing in the number 10 role, so slightly different. And I thought he affected the game well. I think that certainly suits him a little bit more than on the wing, because he's not got the natural pace, in my opinion, to play on the wing. He's much better technically, and he's a very technically gifted player. Brilliant press to win the ball back at 4-hour goal. Great assist for Gilliead. I think them two work really well in that midfield. And Pointon at the start of the season, I don't think anyone would have predicted him to be so important to how we play and how we are. And we've said it a number of times now, it's criminal the way that Mike Hughes really treated him towards the end of his spell at the football club, and Pointon deserves a green box. He was just brilliant all game, and he was the only real player I saw trying to drive us up the pitch. I mean, he was trying to link up with Andy Cook, who we're not going to speak about in today's video, but he looks injured and he just did not affect the game. It's the thing we've been saying for weeks. He just doesn't suit McDonald's style of play, but his knee was strapped up. Is there an injury to Andy Cook? Who knows? But he kind of has to play because Derbyshire's way past it. Oliver, I think, was back in training for the first time today, back in full training, but he's still a number of weeks away. Tyler Smith, very ineffective. So Cook kind of has to play, and his link-up play was poor. Pointon was really trying to drive us up the pitch, but we didn't really have much of an out ball because our wingers were so deep. Cook was failing to hold the ball up. He'd half challenge for it and then he'd turn around and have a moan at the referee, or I'd have a moan at someone. And it just wasn't quite there in the final third. You know, a lot of people say we missed Jamie Walker, but I thought Pointon filled in that 10 role better than what Walker has done. You know, a lot of people have really been saying, I understand we missed Smallwood, but I don't think we really missed Walker, in my opinion. I thought Pointon affected the game really well. Obviously, like what I mentioned, great assist for Gilliead's goal, and someone who gave 110%. And when there were players who, in my opinion, weren't giving 110%, we have to praise the players that were at the end of the day, which is a shame because it shouldn't really be like that. But it was just a massive contrast to what we've seen under Kevin McDonald so far. I don't think any of the fans could have predicted that, especially when MK Dons hadn't won in 9 games. But it was just classic Bradford City at the end of the day. But yeah, really bizarre that he did get subbed off at the time that he did. Maybe we thought the game was done, so he'd rest him for Saturday. I'm not really too sure, but I've gone with the green box for Bobby Pointon. It's just brilliant to see. And I think at times maybe I've given him some unfair stick this season, but I think on Tuesday he really did affect the game in a way that I thought was much better than a lot of the attacking players, because we have a lot of attacking players, and Pointon for me is probably the first on the team sheet right now because a lot of them just don't really do much, but Pointon really does affect the play. He's a very good, technically gifted player, and he always gives it his all, so that's why I've gone with the green box for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty telling when, a teenager who's touched around Northern Premier and vaguely played in the Vanarama North is your best player pretty much on a week-to-week basis. It's pretty telling as to how the squad is at the moment. He kind of just gives 110% every week, and that's all you can ask. And you can definitely see he's a fan of the club, and he tackles harder than some of the defenders half the time. He gets stuck in every time. And for the MK Dons goal, he uses his body really well, gets stuck in and lays a pass off to Gilliead, and it's just brilliant. He doesn't stop running. And I don't know why he keeps getting brought off. Obviously, in the end, on the Wrexham game, he got brought off for the match winner. So I'm not really throwing around too many complaints, but I don't really want to hear an excuse anymore. He's young, let's just kind of ease his way in, because he's an established first-team player now. He's a brilliant player who can do it week in, week out. It's not a fluke, and he's performing on a week-to-week basis. And I think, whatever position he's playing, whether that's on the wing or both wings or in behind as a number 10, he kind of seems to do it all wherever he plays, and he's just a brilliant, brilliant player. And it's kind of, I feel like some weeks he gets a bit of, added motivation in a sense, and maybe he'll get man of the match because of who he is and where he's come from. But I think most of the time it's kind of, deserved the way he plays. And when you run and you put tackles in, the fans going to get behind you all the way. And it's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Bobby Pointon, he continues to build week in, week out. And he's another one. I think him and Gilliead are the only players that can come out of that game with positives, because he was brilliant. He didn't stop running, like I've said. He put some good chances. He's trying to work off with Andy Cook, but he's been terrible for a number of weeks. And I think with the Newport game, it was a complete fluke, and he's not contributing enough. And Lydon Oliver can't come back soon. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Smith goes the whole season without scoring. He never looks like scoring. He takes his chances really, really poorly. He's got no real eye for goal. I don't know if he's even had a shot on target that's been meaningful in a Bradford City shirt. We've kind of relied on Andy Cook too much, I think. I think we've kind of sat back in the summer window and thought Andy Cook's had a brilliant season, he'll go do that again, but we've provided no real backup or a partner for him. I think 2 big men with Lydon Oliver and Andy Cook might work. It might not work. They're not very mobile as players, so that might not work in the sense. But we've got some brilliant wingers that like to change the game and attack defenders, like Bobby Pointon and Adam Wilson. That could definitely work, but I think Lydon Oliver can't come back soon. I think Andy Cook's been terrible for a number of weeks. Like you said, he looks injured at the moment. Doesn't seem to want to move. Stroppy all the time. It's really concerning when your top scorer is looking like one of the worst players on the pitch at the moment, and he's kind of got to just dig himself out of this hole as quick as possible, because we can't be dropping points to people like MK Dons. No disrespect. We've got Sutton at the weekend. That's a perfect chance for him to go and bag 1 or 2 at the weekend. There's a lot of pressure on Andy Cook, but it's kind of, expected. You're playing for a club like Bradford City and you've had a season that you've had, you're kind of expected to replicate in a sense. And I think he's not dealing with that pressure all too well. And I think when Oliver comes back, he probably should be dropped. He got dropped about this time last year and it did him the world of good. So maybe that's what he needs, another drop. And, Oliver to come back in, prove a point, and Andy Cook to finally pull his finger out because he's been poor for a number of weeks now and we've got to change it.
Yeah, I think the Andy Cook situation is obviously a big debate at the moment, but Oliver didn't really impress in many games last season. He hasn't kicked a ball so far for us this year, so it's going to take him again another number of weeks to get back up to full fitness. Patterson's out for a few more weeks, but back onto Bobby Pointon, and one thing I will give him credit for is he absolutely loves a 50-50. Normally with wingers and attacking players, they don't really like getting stuck in, and I think Clark Adore is a prime example of that. Whenever there's some sort of aerial challenge, he never actually challenges for it. He jumps nowhere near the defender and just tries to put him off. Osadebe is a little bit like that as well. He doesn't really like challenging for the ball. And you got players like Tulloch, who I wouldn't say really get stuck in. Wilson doesn't really get stuck in. But if, say, Bobby Pointon had to go in for a 50-50 with Ash Taylor, he'd go in for it with everything that he's got and try and win that ball, no matter how small he is compared to how big the defender is. He wins quite a lot of hair. He's similar to Patterson, wins quite a lot in the air for someone who's not the tallest, and I will definitely give him credit for that. But we'll move on then to our final box. It's an unfortunate red box for Kevin McDonald. Now, was he managing this game? Was it Mark Trueman? I remember in the EFL Trophy game against Grimsby when McDonald played himself, he said it was more Trueman managing the game. And obviously McDonald had to play with Smallwood being injured at this moment in time. And you could certainly tell McDonald wasn't on the sideline because in terms of his player performance, I don't think it was really that bad. It was pretty average, in my opinion. It didn't really do too much right, didn't really do too much wrong, just didn't really affect the game too much. But when he got subbed off and you see your manager on the sidelines wearing a full kit, I mean, it just screams Sunday League, doesn't it? It was, I just thought that's just brilliant, isn't it? But Trueman, I think obviously he did a great spell with Connor Sellers, but since then in his caretaker interim days, they've not been great. I don't think he's actually picked up a single point since obviously he left the club when he was interim manager. Since he was removed from that role, that's the thing that I'm trying to say. I don't think he's actually picked up a single point. And McDonald, for me, he just got it wrong. But the thing, like I mentioned earlier, I've got to give him a little bit of slack because he is not the actual manager. And when we do appoint a manager, whether it's McDonald or somebody else at the moment, like we say, Dean Holden is currently the favourite, because he isn't the manager, he can't make the big decisions. He can't just go, Liam Rydag, I'm dropping you now, because that's an experienced player. And in 2 weeks' time, when he's got to go back to playing with him potentially again, that is a big problem for us. So I think the club need to make a decision now. Sutton at the absolute latest has got to be the last game where McDonald is the caretaker. He needs to either get the job on a full-time basis and potentially retire from playing, or we go out and get somebody different. We just have to get him in because we can't carry on with just playing McDonald picking the easy options, because he needs to keep everybody pleasing. It's all well and good when you win and all that sort of stuff because players can't really complain. But when you've just been battered 4-1, if we potentially only make 1 or 2 changes on Saturday, it's simply not good enough. There should be 4 or 5 changes because the players on Tuesday, I'd say a good 12 or 13 of them were simply not good enough. And that's why I've gone with the red for McDonald. It might be harsh. The box should maybe be aimed at Mark Trueman. I'm not really too sure. But it was just overall not a good night. We got our tactics wrong, in my opinion. If you're going to press MK Dons, you have to get it bang on. And I think with the way both teams were set up, we had to go man for man. We didn't really do that, especially on our left side with Osadebe and Rydag. They both didn't really know who they were pressing at times. And I don't think with obviously Ash Taylor playing, we could really go man for man, and we tried to do that up front, but then not defensively, and it just didn't really work. We got it wrong, apart from really the 1 or 2 times we really won the ball back. Obviously, one led to a goal, but for the majority of the time, they just passed it round and made us look stupid at times, and that's why I've had to go with the red for Kevin McDonald.
I don't really like his player manager title because to some fans he can come off as quite arrogant. If you're playing yourself, and I think he kind of has to maybe take a step back and think, right, what am I doing here? Am I becoming a player, or am I going to concentrate on the managing? He's repeatedly said, on a number of occasions that he doesn't want a managerial job. And if he gets appointed, it's going to look a bit awkward because he clearly isn't interested in the project. And when managers begin to lose interest, they don't have passion for it, it can all go wrong. And, you've seen that before with the interviews with Derek Adams and stuff like that. When things are going wrong, he'll kind of throw players under the bus and it'll lose the fan base and it all goes wrong. And this is a really, really big decision from the club. I think McDonald's bought them time now. And I've seen with, clubs like Oldham, maybe when they sack a manager, they'll come out with a statement 1 or 2 weeks later, providing an update on how they're doing in terms of finding the right, person for the job. But we've kind of heard absolutely nothing in terms of who the next manager is going to be, and they need to start to come out and make a statement. Are they sticking with McDonald, or are they going to go for a manager, or when's this new appointment going to be? You've got to make a call now. I think we've given them enough time now. That we've given them nearly a month to figure it out. I think the call needs to be made before or immediately after Sutton. I don't think the result should kind of impact the decision regardless, because it is Sutton. If we get 3 points, and that's kind of how it was. Nothing really changes. You've got to kind of make a decision. And I'm kind of a bit disappointed with the candidates that are coming up. I don't think Dean Holden's the right man for the job. Stephen Clements, he's had one job in the last 4 years, and that was a caretaker at Sheffield Wednesday. I'm kind of underwhelmed with the targets that we're going in for, and it is all just rumours. It is all just talk at the end of the day. So we're gonna have to wait and see for a decision. But I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in the next, coming days about who the manager is going to be. We've had lots of Carl Robinsons, Neil Redfern, so many things being thrown out. I think the club needs to come out and kind of put a stop to these rumours and finally announce something. There's been so much silence for a number of years now, not just on the managerial topic, but for so much. The last club statement we got was probably for the Wagme situation. We've not really had any representation in the media. We've not really heard much from the higher ups, and I think that's something that is a big issue recently. When Ryan Sparks was on Twitter, he was quite, open with the fans. He was quite transparent in terms of what was going on and stuff like that. But ever since he's gone, it's just been so quiet, and we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes anymore. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. But I think now is the time where the club need to come out and say something about it. I'm not sure McDonald's the right man for the job, if I'm being honest. The football's been brilliant. Don't get me wrong. I think the football's been brilliant under his tenure, but I just don't think it's the right man for the job. He's very experienced, and we need to get someone in who's done it before. And it's a big call to make. I don't think it's the right one. It's going to be very risky if you appoint someone who's never managed before, and it could all go wrong, and all the blame goes to Sparks. And then maybe if a new manager comes in and they say, oh, well, why didn't we go with Kevin McDonald? It was all going right. There's a lot of pressure on Ryan Sparks' shoulders to get this right.
Yeah, we absolutely have to get this appointment correct and bang on. And I think the thing for me right now is McDonald would be a better option than a number of the potential candidates that we're seeing. If it is to be Dean Holden, I'd rather Kevin McDonald, because Holden, from his time at Charlton, I don't know too much about his time. I think it was at Bristol City, but at Charlton, it was very defensive, very, very much the long ball. And you can put up with that sort of football if you're winning, but we've seen so much recently with Gary Bowyer, Derek Adams, Mike Hughes. This defensive football, it simply doesn't work in League Two. You have to appoint an attacking coach. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, Mike Williamson, I don't think would have gone down too well with our fan base with how they saw Hughes play, but Williamson's football was very progressive, and I thought that I was really impressed with MK Dons on Tuesday night. But McDonald, for me, I think would be a better appointment than a number of the managers currently on the list, because he already knows the squad, and I think if he gets it full time, he can then start making these big decisions. And he said himself, I think briefly in the post-match against MK Dons, that's how he wants his own side to play one day. But because he said a number of times now, it's not just the once or twice where he said that he doesn't really want it. He's been very consistent with it. I actually think that personally he doesn't want it. And because he has that time out of football with, was it a kidney transplant, I think?
Yeah.
Because he had that time out, I think he just wants to play for as long as possible, and he doesn't want his career to be cut short for this job. One day he's going to go into management, and I do think one day will be a very good manager, but I personally don't believe he'll want to cut his playing career short just for the sake of some quick success. And like I say, I think he's a better candidate than some of the names that we're seeing. Liam Richardson was favourite for ages. He's now, I think, 33-1. Obviously, a few managers that you've mentioned there. Dean Holden, currently the favourite. For me personally, I don't think Dean Holden is the right man. But again, lots of spinning plates. We'll just have to wait and see. Thank you all very much for tuning in and watching today's video. The match preview for Sutton will be out tomorrow again, because this video has come out a day later than normal. I can only apologise for that. But thank you all very much for tuning in. And Frank, thank you for your time once again. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe. 80 likes would be massively appreciated. Get your thoughts in as well down in the comment section down below on Alex Gilliead, Ash Taylor, Emanuel Osadebe, Pointon and Kevin McDonald. Who do you want as the next Bradford City manager? And we'll see you all very soon for another one. Peace.